The great chamber of the Galactic Council was built to make visitors feel small. Massive crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. Floating platforms held the representatives of 12 ancient species, each one older than human civilization by thousands of years. Light from distant stars filtered through the transparent walls, casting everything in a cold blue glow. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked alone across the polished floor. Her footsteps echoed in the vast silence. She was a small woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of difficult years. Behind her, the massive doors had sealed shut. There was no turning back now. She stopped at the center of the chamber and looked up at the beings who controlled half the galaxy. High Arbiter Zeethvorel watched her from his elevated throne. He was Volathi, a serpentine creature whose body was covered in scales that changed color with his emotions. Right now, they shimmered with shades of purple and gold, colors that meant superiority and mild amusement. Heavy ceremonial chains hung from his neck, each link representing a species that had submitted to council authority. "You stand before the Galactic Council," Zeethvorel said. His voice was translated through the chamber's systems, but the cold tone needed no translation. "Your species has been observed for the past century. We have reached our decision." Elena said nothing. She simply waited. The other counselors shifted on their platforms. There was Dretha of the Kethrani, a massive insectoid being with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the starlight. There was Yethmira of the Luminari, an elegant creature of living light who pulsed gently in the darkness. There were others, shapes and forms that human eyes could barely comprehend. All of them looked down at the lone human woman with expressions ranging from boredom to contempt. "Humanity has expanded too quickly," Zeethvorel continued. "You have claimed 17 colony worlds in the outer reaches. You have built military vessels without council permission. You have established trade routes that bypass our approved networks." He paused, letting the weight of the accusations hang in the air. "This cannot continue." Elena remained still. Her face showed nothing. "The council has determined the following terms," the High Arbiter said. "First, humanity will surrender all colony worlds beyond your original system. Second, your military fleet will be reduced by 80%, with the remaining ships placed under council supervision. Third, your species will accept guidance protocols for a period of no less than 500 years, during which all expansion must be approved by this body." The chamber fell silent. Every counselor watched the human woman, waiting for the fear to appear on her face. They had seen this moment many times before. Young species always reacted the same way. First came denial, then bargaining, then finally submission. It was the natural order of things. "Failure to comply," Zeethvorel added, his scales shifting to darker colors, "will result in economic isolation. All council species will cease trade with your worlds. Your ships will be denied access to transit gates. And if these measures prove insufficient—" He let the threat hang unfinished. Elena took a slow breath. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each counselor in turn. Some looked away. Others stared back with ancient indifference. "No," she said. Not the word was quiet, but it carried through the entire chamber. For a moment, nobody moved. The translator systems hummed softly, as if unsure they had processed the sound correctly. Zeethvorel's scales flickered with confusion. "I do not understand." "Repeat your response." I said no. Elena's voice was calm and steady. "Humanity rejects your terms." "All of them." A ripple of movement passed through the council. Dretha's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation among the Kethrani. Several other counselors exchanged glances. This was not following the expected pattern. "You do not seem to understand your position," Zeethvorel said. His scales were now shifting toward red, a color that meant anger among his kind. You are one species. We are 12. Our combined fleets number in the tens of thousands. Your colonies survive because we allow them to survive. You have no leverage here. Elena smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. High Arbiter, she said, I have studied your history. In 4,000 years of council rule, no species has ever refused your demands. You have grown accustomed to obedience. You expect fear. She shook her head slowly. You will not find it here. Then you will find destruction, Zethforel hissed. Perhaps, Elena replied. But I wonder if you have studied our history in return. Do you know how humanity reached the stars? We did not have ancient knowledge passed down from elder species. We did not have guidance protocols or approved expansion routes. We climbed out of the mud and built everything ourselves. One painful step at a time. She began to walk slowly, her footsteps echoing again in the stunned silence. We have fought wars that killed hundreds of millions of our own kind. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and disasters that should have ended us. We have split the atom and walked on our moon and reached across the void of space, all through our own effort. She stopped and looked up at Zethforel. Your threats do not frighten us. We have faced worse. The High Arbiter's scales were now fully red. You are making a terrible mistake. No, Elena said. You are. You see a young species and assume weakness. You see small numbers and assume easy victory. But you do not understand what you are threatening. She pulled a small device from her pocket and pressed a button. Every counselor's display suddenly lit up with a new message. This is being broadcast to every human world right now, Elena said. This is our answer to your ultimatum. And this is your warning. She turned and began walking toward the doors. Behind her, the counselors read the message in stunned silence. It contained only one line. Humanity does not negotiate under threat. You cannot simply leave. Zethforel called out. This council has not dismissed you. Elena paused at the door. She did not turn around. Then add it to your list of things humanity does not do, she said. We do not beg. We do not submit. And we do not ask permission to exist. The doors opened before her. She walked through them without looking back. Behind her, the great chamber of the Galactic Council erupted into chaos. Counselors shouted at each other in a dozen different languages. Aides rushed between platforms carrying urgent messages. Zethforel slammed his ceremonial chains against his throne, demanding order. But order would not come easily. For the first time in 4,000 years, someone had said no, and none of them knew what would happen next. On her transport ship heading back to Earth, Elena Vasquez sat alone in her cabin. She looked out at the stars streaming past and allowed herself a moment of doubt. She had just challenged the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. She had put billions of human lives at risk, but when she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of her ancestors. Farmers and soldiers, scientists and dreamers, ordinary people who had refused to surrender even when all hope seemed lost. They had not given up. Neither would she. The war for humanity's future had begun. In the days that followed Ambassador Vasquez's departure, the Galactic Council descended into confusion. Messengers raced between chambers. Emergency sessions were called and canceled. Ancient protocols were searched for guidance, but none existed. No species had ever simply walked away from Council demands. High Arbiter Zethforel spent long hours in private communication with his advisors on the Vorlithy homeworld. His scales had not returned to their normal colors since the human woman's defiance. Every report that arrived made them shift further toward shades of uncertainty and fear. They are not fleeing, his intelligence chief reported. They are not dismantling their fleets. They are not evacuating their colonies. Then what are they doing? Zethvorel demanded. Building, preparing, organizing. The intelligence chief paused. They are acting as if they intend to fight. This made no sense to the Vorothi leader. The Council's combined military power was overwhelming. Human ships were fewer, smaller, and less advanced. Their colonies were young and poorly defended. Any rational species would recognize the impossible odds and seek terms, but the humans were not seeking terms. They were digging in. Councillor Dretha of the Kethrani Dominion called for a special military assessment. The Kethrani were the Council's primary warriors, a species that had built their entire civilization around the science of conflict. Their war calculators were the most advanced in the galaxy. They could predict the outcome of any battle with near-perfect accuracy. The results of their assessment disturbed everyone. "We will win," Dretha announced to the assembled council. His forearms gestured at holographic displays, showing fleet movements and battle projections. "This is certain. Human military capability is inferior in every measurable way." "Then why do you seem troubled?" asked Yethmara of the Luminari. Dretha's compound eyes flickered. "Because the cost will be unusual." He brought up new projections. Numbers scrolled across the displays. Casualty estimates, resource expenditures, time calculations. The counselors studied them in growing silence. "These figures must be wrong," said the representative from the Torvashi merchant guilds. "You are projecting losses equivalent to the Third Expansion War. That conflict lasted 80 years. "The figures are correct," Dretha replied. "Humans fight differently than any species in our records. They do not retreat when defeated. They do not surrender when surrounded. They do not negotiate when losing." He paused. "They continue fighting until they cannot physically fight anymore. And then they find new ways to fight." "Madness," someone muttered. "Perhaps," Dretha agreed, "but effective madness. Our war calculators predict that we could destroy their military forces within 2 standard years. However, occupying their worlds would require another decade. Suppressing resistance would require another century. And the resources needed." He let the numbers speak for themselves. The chamber fell silent. No species wanted to commit to a 100-year war. Their populations would not accept such sacrifices. Their economies would not survive such strain. "There must be another way," Zethvorel said. "Economic pressure, isolation, starve them into submission." But the Torvashi representative was already shaking his head. "Our trading networks have been attempting to implement sanctions. The results are concerning." "Explain." "Human merchants have been building alternative routes for years. Shadow networks that bypass our approved channels. They anticipated our actions." The Torvashi's voice held grudging respect. "They have been preparing for this confrontation for far longer than we realized." On Earth, Ambassador Vasquez addressed the United Terran Assembly. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from every human world. Billions more watched through broadcast, systems that carried her words to the farthest colonies. She stood at the central podium, looking out at the sea of faces. Some showed fear. Some showed anger. All of them looked to her for guidance. "You have heard the Council's demands," she began. "You know what they want us to become. Servants, subjects, a controlled species under the supervision of those who believe themselves our superiors." She let the words settle. "I told them no. Now I must ask you, did I speak for humanity?" The response came like thunder. Every representative rose to their feet. The sound of voices united in agreement echoed through the hall and across the stars. Helena waited for the noise to fade. "They believe fear will break us," she continued. "They expect us to calculate the odds and accept defeat. They think we will choose comfort over freedom, safety over pride." She shook her head. They have not studied our history. She activated a display behind her. Images appeared. Ancient battles and modern struggles. Moments of desperation and triumph from across human history. Our ancestors walked out of ice ages that killed entire species. They survived plagues that should have ended our story before it truly began. They faced tyrants and empires and odds that seemed impossible. Her voice grew stronger, and every time they refused to surrender. Every time they found a way to survive. She turned to face the display, looking at the images of those who came before. We are the children of survivors. Every single one of us carries the blood of people who refuse to give up. That stubbornness is not a weakness. It is our greatest strength. She turned back to the assembly. The council sees a young species. They see small numbers and young colonies. But they do not see what makes us dangerous. She stepped forward, her eyes blazing. We are dangerous because we have always been outnumbered. We are dangerous because we have always faced impossible odds. We are dangerous because we have learned across thousands of years of struggle that the only true defeat is the one you accept. She raised her fist. And we do not accept defeat. The assembly erupted again. This time, the sound was different. This was not just agreement. This was commitment. This was the sound of a species preparing for war. The broadcast spread across human space at the speed of light. On colony worlds, miners stopped their work and watched. On cargo ships, crews gathered around screens. On military vessels, soldiers checked their weapons. Everywhere, the message was the same. Humanity would not bow. Humanity would not break. Humanity would stand together against whatever came. The Galactic Council intercepted the transmission, as Elena had intended. They watched the human woman speak. They saw the response of her people. They heard the thunder of unified defiance. And for the first time in 4,000 years, the ancient powers of the galaxy felt something they had almost forgotten. ZETH single quotes VORL watched the recording alone in his private chambers. He replayed it 3 times, studying the human faces, trying to understand what he was seeing. They cannot win, he said to himself. The numbers are against them. The technology is against them. Everything is against them. But the humans did not seem to care about what was against them. They only seemed to care about what they stood for. The High Arbiter turned off the recording and sat in the darkness. Somewhere deep in his ancient mind, a small voice was asking a terrible question. What if we have made a mistake? He pushed the thought away. There was no room for doubt now. The council had given its ultimatum. The humans had refused. The only path forward was the one they had always walked. But as he prepared for the conflict ahead, Zethfarel could not shake the feeling that this time the path might lead somewhere unexpected. The first crack appeared 3 weeks after the ultimatum. The Velith Communion was a collective of empaths, beings who could sense emotions across vast distances. They had no military to speak of and contributed to the council through their unique ability to read the emotional state of other species. For thousands of years, they had helped the council predict the behavior of new civilizations. Now, the Velith were terrified. Their representative, a shimmering being of pale light called Sirith, appeared before the emergency council session. Unlike other meetings, Sirith did not speak with calm authority. The being's form flickered and pulsed with visible distress. We must withdraw from this action, Sirith announced. The Velith Communion cannot support military intervention against humanity. Zethforel's scales flashed with anger. You cannot withdraw. The council acts as one. Then the council must act without us. Sirith's form grew brighter, as if struggling to contain something. You do not understand what we have sensed. We have been monitoring human emotional broadcasts since your ultimatum. What we have felt Double quotes, the being paused, searching for words. They are not afraid, Sirith continued. We expected fear. We expected despair. Instead, we sensed something else. Something that burns like a star. Explain, demanded Dretha. Defiance. Pure, absolute defiance. Not the desperate kind that breaks under pressure. This is something deeper. Something built into their very nature. Sirith's voice trembled. These beings do not fear death. They embrace struggle. They draw strength from opposition. The more you threaten them, the stronger they become. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably. You are exaggerating, Zethvorel said. No species welcomes conflict. Humans do. Sirith's form pulsed with certainty. We have never sensed anything like this in 4,000 years of service. This is not prey you are hunting, High Arbiter. This is something else entirely. Something that will not stop until it wins, or is completely destroyed. Then we will destroy them. Can you? Sirith asked quietly. Are you willing to pay that price? Because our empaths believe that any attempt to crush humanity will cost more than the Council can afford. And even if you succeed, the memory of this conflict will poison the galaxy for generations. The Velith representative turned and floated toward the exit. The communion withdraws its support. We will not participate in this madness. When the consequences arrive, remember that we warned you. The doors closed behind Sirith. The chamber fell into troubled silence. The second crack came from an unexpected direction. The Torvashi merchant guilds had been among the strongest supporters of action against humanity. Human traders had been cutting into their profits for decades. The ultimatum was supposed to eliminate the competition and restore Torvashi dominance over galactic commerce. But 3 days after the Velith withdrawal, Guildmaster Corvith requested a private meeting with High Arbiter Zethvorel. We are receiving offers, Corvith said. The Torvashi was a stocky being with thick gray skin and small eyes that missed nothing when it came to profit. From human corporations. Of course they are trying to negotiate, Zethvorel replied. Reject their offers. I am not certain that would be wise. Corvith pulled out a data display. These are not desperate pleas from a cornered species. These are serious business proposals. Trade agreements that would give us exclusive access to human markets. Technology exchanges that could advance our production by centuries. Access to resources in sectors we have never been able to reach. Zethvorel stared at the Torvashi. You would betray the Council for profit? I would consider all options for the benefit of my people, Corvith replied calmly. And I am not the only one receiving such offers. My sources tell me that similar messages have reached the Keth manufacturing consortiums, the Luminary Research Institutes, and at least 4 other Council-aligned commercial entities. The humans are trying to divide us. They are succeeding. Corvith put away his display. High Arbiter, my guild supported this action because we believed it would be quick and profitable. Your military assessment suggests otherwise. A prolonged conflict would devastate trade across the entire sector. Meanwhile, the humans are offering us partnership instead of war. He shook his head. I am a merchant. I go where the profit flows. Right now, it is flowing away from your ultimatum. 2 days later, Torvashi ships began quietly rerouting away from the blockade zones. No formal announcement was made. The merchants simply stopped participating. The third crack was the deepest counselor. Yethmara of the Luminari was ancient even by council standards. Her species had traveled between stars when most other races were still learning to use fire. She had served on the council for 300 years and had seen dozens of civilizations rise and fall, had also been reviewing old records. I found something interesting, she said to the assembled council. Her glowing form pulsed with the soft blue that indicated contemplation. In our archives from humanity's first contact. Ancient history, Zethfarel dismissed. Irrelevant to current matters. Is it? Yethmara brought up a holographic display. 47 years ago, a luminary scout vessel suffered a critical failure near human space. The ship was damaged. The crew was dying. They sent a distress signal, not expecting any response. The display showed images from old recordings. A damaged alien ship drifting in space. A human vessel approaching. The humans responded, Yethmara continued. They had no obligation to help. Our species had never contacted them. They knew nothing about us. Yet they came anyway. They risked their own lives to save our crew. The recording showed human figures in spacesuits, working frantically to repair alien systems they did not understand. 3 human engineers died during the rescue, Yethmara said softly. They died saving beings they had never met, from a species they had never known. When asked why they helped, the human captain said. She paused, reading from the old transcript. He said, because they needed help. What other reason do we need? The chamber was silent. These are the beings we have threatened with destruction, Yethmara continued. A species that sacrifices its own people to save strangers. A species that responds to calls for help without asking for anything in return. She looked directly at Zethvarel. We have made a grave error, High Arbiter. We saw their strength and called it aggression. We saw their growth and called it threat. But we did not see what they truly are. And what is that? Zethvarel asked coldly. Protectors. Yethmara's form pulsed brighter. They do not expand to conquer. They expand to include. They do not build fleets to attack. They build them to defend. She shook her head slowly. We threatened the wrong species. We pushed the wrong enemy. The cracks were spreading. The Velith had withdrawn. The Torvashi were hedging their bets. The Luminari were questioning the entire foundation of council action. Zethvarel looked around the chamber at his fellow counselors. Where there had been unity, he now saw doubt. Where there had been confidence, he now saw fear. But he had come too far to turn back. The ultimatum had been issued. The council's authority was at stake. If they retreated now, every young species in the galaxy would see weakness. We proceed as planned, he announced. Assemble the fleet. We will show humanity and the rest of the galaxy what happens when someone defies the council. The order went out. Ships began gathering from across council space. The largest military force in centuries was being assembled. But as the fleet prepared to move, more species began quietly pulling back their contributions. The cracks were becoming fractures. The fractures were becoming breaks. And somewhere in human space, Elena Vasquez watched the reports and allowed herself a small smile. It's working, she said to her advisors. Their alliance is falling apart. Not fast enough, replied Admiral Chun Wei. The hardliners still have enough ships to attack. We need to be ready. Elena nodded. Then let's make sure that when they arrive, they find something they don't expect. The trap was being set. Now all they had to do was wait. The Council strike fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 300 warships from 6 different species, each one bristling with weapons that could reduce cities to ash. They were the iron fist of galactic authority, a force that had crushed rebellions and ended civilizations for 4,000 years. Fleet Commander Vorith of the Kethrani stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical displays come alive with data. His compound eyes processed information faster than any human computer could match. Within seconds, he understood the battlefield before him, Arcturus Gate, humanity's primary transit hub, a massive station that served as the crossroads of human space. Beyond it lay the path to Earth itself. Taking this station would cripple human expansion and send a clear message to every watching species. But something was wrong. "Commander," his sensor officer reported, "we are detecting human military vessels in defensive formation around the station." "How many?" 217 warships. The 2nd and 7th Terran fleets. Vorith's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. The humans were outnumbered nearly 3-2. Their ships were smaller and less powerful. This would be a difficult fight, but victory was certain. Then the secondary readings came through. "Commander, there is something else." Vorith looked at the display and felt his confidence waver. Between the Council fleet and the military vessels, filling the space around the station, were thousands of other ships. Civilian vessels, freighters and cargo haulers, mining ships and passenger liners, construction vessels and private yachts. Ships of every size and shape, all holding position in a wall of metal and light. "What is this?" Vorith demanded. "Civilian traffic, Commander. Our records show that evacuation orders were issued to Arcturus Gate 4 days ago. These vessels should have departed. Then why are they still here?" The sensor officer's voice was uncertain. "It appears they refused to leave." Vorith stared at the display. The civilians were not running. They were not hiding behind their military. They were positioning themselves directly in the path of any attack. Men, women, children, ordinary people who had no weapons and no armor. They were using their own bodies as shields. A communication request appeared on the main screen. Vorith accepted it. The face that appeared was human. An older man with a weathered face and calm eyes. He wore the uniform of a Terran admiral. "I am Admiral Chen Wei of the Terran Defense Force," the man said. "You have entered human space with hostile intent. I am offering you one opportunity to withdraw." Vorith's mandibles clicked with amusement. "You are outnumbered and outmatched. Surrender the station and your fleet may be spared." Admiral Chun did not flinch. "You misunderstand. I am not asking for terms. I am giving you a warning." "A warning?" Vorith leaned forward. "What can you possibly warn us about?" "This," Chun gestured, and the display expanded to show the full scope of the civilian presence. "These are not soldiers. They are teachers and farmers and engineers. They are families. They are children. They have no weapons." His voice hardened. "And they are not leaving." Vorith felt the first hint of unease. "They will be killed. Yes, they know this." Chun's eyes were steady. "They have chosen to stand here anyway. They have chosen to make you face the cost of your decision. This is madness. No rational species would sacrifice civilians. We are not sacrificing anyone. They volunteered. Every single one of them." Chun paused. "You see, Commander, you do not understand humanity. You think we are like other species. You think we will flee from danger and protect ourselves above all else. But that is not who we are." The Admiral stepped closer to the camera. "We are the species that runs toward disaster to save strangers. We are the species that stands in front of danger to protect the weak. We have done this throughout our entire history, from our earliest days to this very moment." His voice dropped lower. "And we will do it here, today, right now." Vorith's confidence was crumbling. His tactical training had not prepared him for this. "If you attack this station," Chun continued, "you will have to kill every man, woman, and child standing in your way. You will have to fire your weapons at unarmed civilians who chose to be here. You will have to watch them die, knowing that they faced you without fear." He leaned in, his eyes burning. "And then you will have to answer to every human who draws breath. We do not forgive this kind of thing. We do not forget. You will create an enemy that will never stop, never rest, never accept peace until justice is served." He paused. "Choose, Commander. Choose very carefully. The transmission ended. Vorith stood frozen on his bridge. Around him, his crew waited for orders. The tactical situation had not changed. The Council fleet still had superior firepower. They could still win this battle. But at what cost? He thought about the Kethrani war calculators. They had predicted victory with acceptable losses. But they had not calculated for this. They had not accounted for civilians who refused to run. They had not measured the cost of firing on unarmed people who stood their ground out of pure conviction. Hours passed. Neither fleet moved. The civilian ships held their position, a silent testament to human stubbornness. Aboard those vessels, families sat together, holding hands, watching the stars and waiting. Then the reports started coming in from Nexus Prime. The Torvashi had formally withdrawn from the coalition. The Velith were refusing all communication. 3 more species had announced their opposition to military action. Economic sanctions were collapsing as human trade. Networks continued to function. Despite the blockade, the Council's alliance was falling apart in real time. And still the humans did not move. Vorith received a private message from High Arbiter Zeth Varl. It was brief and frantic. Support was collapsing. Political pressure was mounting. The operation had to succeed quickly or not, at all. But there was no quick success to be found here. Only a long and bloody massacre that would turn the entire galaxy against them. The first Council ship turned away, 12 hours into the standoff. It was a Torvashi vessel, its captain claiming engine trouble. No one believed the excuse, but no one challenged it either. Within the next hour, 6 more ships departed, then a dozen. Then the trickle became a flood. Vorith watched his fleet dissolve. Captains from 5 different species, all finding reasons to leave. Engine problems. Supply issues. Orders from home governments. The excuses piled up, but the meaning was clear. No one wanted to be the one who gave the order to fire on civilians. By the morning of the second day, only 80 Council ships remained. The rest had scattered to the void, retreating from a battle that had never been fought. Vorith was left with a choice. He could still attack. His remaining force could still inflict terrible damage. But it would be a hollow victory that would cost the Council everything. He thought about the human admiral's words, about creating an enemy that would never stop, about the weight of killing people who refused to fear death. Then he gave the order to withdraw. As his fleet turned away from Arcturus Gate. A message arrived from Admiral Sean Wei. It contained only 2 words: "Thank you." Vorith did not respond. He simply watched the station grow smaller in his display, surrounded by thousands of civilian ships that had not moved throughout the entire confrontation. He had been defeated by an enemy that never fired a shot, beaten by farmers and teachers and ordinary people who had simply refused to run in his private quarters that night. Vorith composed his resignation. His career was over. The Council's authority was shattered. Everything had changed, and somewhere on Arcturus Station, families were reuniting. Children were asking their parents why they had stayed, and the parents were trying to explain something that the galaxy was just beginning to understand. Humanity did not stand alone. They stood together, and when they stood together, nothing in the universe could move them. The aftermath reshaped the galaxy in ways that no one could have predicted. High Arbiter Zeth Varl did not last a week after their retreat from Arcturus Gate. His scales had turned permanently gray, a sign of deep shame among the Vorothi. He resigned his position in a brief ceremony witnessed by only a handful of loyalists. No one argued. No one defended him. The being who had ruled the Council for 3 centuries simply walked away into obscurity. The Council itself survived, but it was forever changed. The old way of doing things where ancient species dictated terms and younger civilizations obeyed, had shattered against a single word spoken by a human woman. The cracks that had appeared during the crisis only widened in the months that followed. 6 species formally withdrew from the alliance within the first year. Others renegotiated their terms, demanding equal voice in decisions that affected them. The Torvashi merchant guilds established direct trade agreements with human corporations, bypassing council-approved networks entirely. The Velith communion remained neutral, but their empaths began working with human diplomats, sharing insights that helped bridge the gap between species. And humanity rose, not through conquest, not through force. They rose through the simple fact that they had stood firm when everyone expected them to fall. Every species in the galaxy had watched the standoff at Arcturus Gate. They had seen the civilian ships refusing to move. They had seen the mighty Council fleet turn away in defeat. The message was clear. Humanity was not to be pushed around. Ambassador Elena Vasquez returned to Nexus Prime 6 months after the crisis ended. She walked through the same crystalline halls where she had once faced contempt and threats. But this time, the reception was different. The chamber was filled, but the floating platforms were arranged in a circle rather than a hierarchy. There was no throne for the High Arbiter, no elevation for elder species. Everyone sat at the same level, facing each other as equals. This was the new council, the one that had been born from the ashes of the old. Helena took her seat among the other representatives. Beside her was Admiral Chun Wei, now serving as humanity's military liaison to the Reformed Alliance. Across the circle sat Yethmora of the Luminare, who had become one of humanity's strongest advocates. The session began with a simple acknowledgement of what had happened. We are gathered here to formalize what has already been proven, said the new speaker, a neutral figure chosen from a species that had not participated in the conflict. Humanity has earned their place among us, not as subjects or dependents. As equals, there was no objection. The vote was unanimous. After the ceremony, Yethmara approached Elena in the gardens outside the chamber. The luminary's glowing form pulsed, with colors that Elena had learned to read over the past. Months, curiosity, respect, and something that might have been friendship. I have wanted to ask you something since this all began, Yethmara said. May I? Elena nodded. Double quotes. How did you do it? The luminary's voice was soft with wonder. You were so few, so young as a species, so outmatched in every measurable way. How did you stand against all of us and not break? Elena considered the question carefully. It deserved a real answer. Because we have always been outnumbered, she said finally. From the moment we climbed down from the trees, we have faced enemies larger and stronger than ourselves. Predators with claws and fangs. Diseases we could not see. Disasters we could not predict. Our planet itself tried to kill us countless times. She looked up at the alien sky, so different from Earth, but somehow familiar. We survived because we learned that the only way to beat impossible odds is to refuse to accept them. When everyone tells us we cannot win, something inside us gets angry. When everyone expects us to surrender, we find strength we did not know we had. Yethmera listened in silence. Your council thought fear would break us, Elena continued. But we have faced fear before. We have faced extinction before. We have stood at the edge of oblivion and pulled ourselves back through sheer stubbornness. She smiled. Threatening us only reminded us of who we are. And who is that? Yethmara asked. Elena thought about the families who had refused to leave Arcturus Gate, the soldiers who had stood ready to die defending them, the ordinary people across human space who had answered the call to resist. Survivors, she said. That is what we are. That is what we have always been. Every single human alive today carries the blood of ancestors who refused to give up. We are the descendants of people who chose to keep fighting when all hope was lost. She turned to face the Luminari directly. You cannot defeat that. You can kill us. You can destroy our ships and burn our worlds. But you cannot make us stop, because the moment we stop fighting, we stop being human. Yethmura was silent for a long moment. Then her form pulsed with the deep blue that signified understanding. Your species frightens us, she admitted. Elena nodded. Good. Maybe now we can be friends. The Luminari made a sound that Elena had learned was their equivalent of a laugh. You are a strange people, but I think we have much to learn from each other. I think so too. They stood together in the garden, two beings from worlds separated by impossible distances, finding common ground in the aftermath of conflict. 1 year later, the first joint expedition set out from Council Space. It was a mission of exploration, not conquest. Vessels from 12 species, including humanity, traveled together into unknown regions of the galaxy. They shared technology and knowledge. They learned each other's languages and customs. They began building something new. Admiral Chen Wei commanded the human contingent. Ambassador Vasquez had returned to Earth, where she served as an advisor to the Terran Assembly. But she watched the expedition's progress with pride. The old galaxy was gone. The ancient hierarchies had crumbled. In their place, something different was growing. An alliance based on mutual respect rather than fear. A partnership of equals rather than a tyranny of elders. Humanity had not won through military might. They had won by showing the galaxy what they truly were. A species that protected the weak. A species that stood firm against threats. A species that turned enemies into friends through stubborn refusal to give up. Somewhere in the vastness of space, other young civilizations watched what humanity had accomplished. They saw that it was possible to stand against ancient powers and survive. They saw that courage and conviction could overcome numbers and weapons, and they began to hope the galaxy would never be the same. The age of submission was over. The age of partnership had begun, and at the center of it all stood humanity, not as conquerors or rulers, not as servants or subjects, simply as themselves, stubborn, brave, compassionate, unbreakable. Human. In the final records of the crisis, historians would note a single moment that defined everything that followed. It was the instant when Ambassador Elena Vasquez, standing alone before the combined might of 12 elder species, spoke a single word that changed the course of galactic history. No, not such a small word. Such a simple response. But it contained everything that made humanity unique. The refusal to bow. The determination to stand. The absolute conviction that some things were worth any price. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. When humanity says no, they mean it. And when they stand together, nothing in the universe can make them fall.